Greetings and welcome to Maisha Kazini. In this video, I want to talk about two things that seem disconnected, but in the video, I will show how they are connected. The first one is about this idea of the schools being the place where we teach people to fish. This is a proverb I hear came from China that has been domesticated so much in Kenya that we've lost the context in which we need to interpret some of these ideas. So the idea is that we should be teaching people to fish rather than fishing for them. And I want to say how that proverb can be misused when we are thinking about education. And the second thing I want to talk about is the proposed university bill, which seeks to prevent universities from offering diplomas and certificates. And there's a way in which it's connected to our idea of education, which is actually the fundamental thing I want to talk about. But I'm going to start this video by telling a story about myself. And I want to talk about how I first opened my bank account. I opened my bank account when I was a first year in university. I was still in the old system where we received a stipend called Boom in the public universities. And this Boom was supposed to take care of our books and other expenses. When I got my first Boom, my father took me to a bank. He showed me about lining up. So we lined up. Those days, we didn't have M-Pesa or online banking where we could withdraw money without having to enter the banking hall. We had to get the cash from the bank. So he took me, we lined up in the bank. I even remember the building where it was in the CBD. And then when we got to the counter, he showed me, this is how you fill in the document you want to get to withdraw your money. He told me when the teller is counting the money with the machine, make sure you look and watch very carefully so that you know that the money you're withdrawing is what you'll get. And then now you'll sign and then you leave. He even told me, make sure you put your money in a place that is safe. And preferably when you go to the bank, don't go very well dressed because you'll be singled out as somebody who has money. Anyway, I still have that bank account. Actually, I still operate it. That must be about 30 years later. Now, in this post that I saw, there was a teacher saying how they had taken their children, the children in their class to the bank and told them about bank accounts and everything. And the idea was teach a child how to fish instead of teaching them to fish. Now, the problem with that kind of thing, with something like opening a bank account, is that it has no context. Even if you're practically taking the children to the bank, there's no context. They have no money. I had money. I had an account. And so when I'm going to the bank, I am going to deposit money and to create an account and being told how to operate the account based on needs that I actually have. It was not an abstract idea of, oh, when you get money, this is what you do. And basically, I'm not saying that everybody should be taught how to open a bank account by their parents. That's ridiculous. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of practical skills that we get from operating in life when we are taught in context. In this case, the context was that I had cash. And so my father took me to the bank. Even if it was not my father, whoever took me, it doesn't matter. The point is that there was a context that supported me having a bank account. And my father didn't want me putting the money under my mattress because he knew that I would spend it badly or I will lose it or whatever. So there was a context as opposed to teaching kids how to open a bank account in an abstract form which has no connection to their reality. So there are a lot of things that we need to learn from context. And I think this is the confusion we have about education. We have been cheated so much that education is for teaching people practical skills that now we are removing the things that we learn from context and putting them in the classroom. And yet the context also teaches us a lesson without actually saying it. I have given this example before the child's game, nyama, nyama, nyama. Then everybody replies, nyama. And then the leader of the game mentions different animals. And if they are edible animals, the children shout nyama as they jump. And the others, and if it's not an animal that's edible, then they are supposed to stand. And the game is to see how quickly children can make a split decision and make the correct one. That's the game. The point of that game is many things. One is to play with rules and to revise these rules that children are learning as they go along. Number two is to have fun, really. It's to have fun amongst each other. Number three is the rhythm of the game. Because nyama has two syllables. So we say nya and then ma when we come down. So there are so many things going on when that game is being played among children outside of the classroom. But what I saw a video done by KICD where it was a teacher who was using that game to teach. That already removes the equality between the children. You see, when children are playing, they're all equals and it's fun. But when the teacher is now doing it in the classroom, there's a power imbalance. And the children are not really having fun. They're doing what the teacher says. If KICD wanted to do that game in class, it should still be a child leading the game. It shouldn't be the teacher leading the game. But you see also, the point is that we Kenyans don't have an idea of the importance of context. So we think the point is the content. The content is to have nyama and people repeat and then whatever. But we are not looking at what are the unsaid things about how this game is being played. So anyway, the teacher not only leads the game, but translates it into English and says, meat, meat, meat. And then the children say, meat. What is wrong with that? The problem with doing that is that you've reduced nyama, which is 2 syllables, nyama, to 1 syllable, meat. And then, so when the children are jumping, the rhythm is not the same. They can't, there's no rhythm and there's no rhyming. And you see also the point of when kids are playing is the body movement, that they are learning to jump. They are learning to coordinate what they hear with what they are doing physically, which is the point of dance. But now you've removed the syllable, you've changed the syllables, and so the dancing cannot be quite the same. But it got worse at the end of the lesson, because I kept wondering, why are they doing this lesson? What is there to teach, really? And at the end of the class is when we get the point. The teacher asks the children, why did you jump when you had a certain animal? And the children say, because I was listening attentively. Now, people, we can't teach children like this, please, eh? And that's what CBC is doing. It's extracting the lessons from the context and putting children in the classroom and expecting to teach children the same thing. You can't. You cannot teach the same thing when you remove things from the context. So going back to the bank account, if we want to teach young people how to open bank accounts, which they can't open before they are 18, these are things you do with career fairs. When children are, instead of having children burning their books at the end of Form 4, that's the time you have a career fair. You tell them this is how your life is going to be. This is a one way to make money. This is a one way to save. Join a SACCO, do all these things. In fact, even my students, I tell them those things, especially teachers, because teachers don't expect to earn very much money when they leave. So you tell them those things when there's a context. You're sending them out to work. And anyway, even when they start working, this is the time with their fellow teachers. This is where they start to learn, oh, there's a SACCO. This is how the SACCO works. This is where the meeting is. This is the bank. This is how to buy shares. It makes sense in a context. But to say, because we are being practical, we're going to take children out for a trip to the bank where the marketing manager just comes and repeats the points, which children can't even understand because it's not in context. This is the confusion we have. we are refusing to see that some things have to be taught at the workplace. And this idea that the school prepares people for the workplace is such a bad idea, and people don't want to let go of it. That you can completely prepare somebody, and then on day one at the workplace, they know how to do the work. That is stupidity. It cannot happen. But why do we still believe in this ideology? This philosophy came from the colonialists. The colonialists wanted us to learn just enough to keep the colonial machine going, but not enough to ask whether this machine works for us Africans or not. And now this brings me to the question of diplomas. Now, how did we reach to a point where the universities are teaching certificates and diplomas? In 2002, I think it was, when the Kibaki government came into power, they told institutions, now you're not going to get money from the exchequer, you have to raise money for yourself. So universities started looking for ways to raise money for themselves because the exchequer was not going to give them. But you see, this decline had started from the structure adjustment programs of IMF in the 90s during Moi's era. And in fact, I received boom, I think, only for 2 years. After that, it was cut off because the IMF said no more boom. The government should not be supporting university education to this point. And we rioted, we went home for a year, but when we came back, we were made to pay some basic fees and we were made to pay for our housing and our food, which we were not doing before. So from the 1990s, there has been a slow defunding of university education. And this agenda was pushed on the government by the IMF. In 1986, even before now I was in university, in 1986, the World Bank called vice chancellors from African universities to Harare in Zimbabwe and told them Africans don't need university education. They only need primary school education. And so you people should go back home and close your universities. I mean, that thing was so stupid. And in fact, later on, the World Bank admitted that it was a foolish idea. How is a VC going to get himself out of a job? By closing down universities? And those kids who are being taught, and they're being taught by teachers, and those teachers being trained, what are you saying? But basically, this is the idea that the West has always had, that Black people should not have education. That's the basic idea. And it comes in different forms and whatever, but it's still the same idea that Africans should not know more than what is necessary to keep the imperialist colonial system going. So education has always made people very nervous. And this is the contradiction we have not understood, because we think that the colonialists wanted us to get an education, the missionaries wanted us to be Christians, and oh, very nice, we are only taught what white people want us to know. No, that's not how it works. It's that the education we get, or the education people were getting during colonial times, was very reluctantly given. They didn't want to give it. And when the little that they gave, they wanted it to be just enough to run the machine and never ask about the colonial machine. And this contradiction is explained very well by Walter Rodney in this book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I encourage you to read it, because this book is really good at explaining the whole context that sets the pace for every other history you will read, whether it's about slavery or whether it's about colonialism. What Rodney says is that colonialists and settlers didn't want Africans to get education. But there was a contradiction, because for the colonial system to work, it needed people to be able to do clerical work, to communicate with the Africans what they needed to do. So they needed staff, and they could not keep on importing white people from Europe to come and do that work. First of all, because it would have been too expensive. They would not have afforded, because for colonialists to work here, they were working as expatriates. So they needed holidays, transport, families, whatever. So they could not afford to just have white people working, and they needed to train Africans. So that was one contradiction, that even though colonialists didn't want Africans getting education, they needed to train people. Missionaries also had a very interesting fantasy, which was, once we convert a few Africans, those Africans will convert the rest. But to do that, Africans needed to read the Bible. So they needed to teach people to read the Bible. And then the third thing was, the few companies that were here in Africa, especially the mining companies, they wanted Africans to have the basic mining techniques. And this is where the fantasy of Kina Kepsa and other businesses is really very magical, so to speak. Because when the mining companies were coming to Africa, they didn't want the higher technical skills to be held by Africans. So this TVET, which you keep imagining, will make us like Germany. No, that's not how it will work. Do you think Germans want to give us their technical skills? And then what will their people do? Come on. So even during colonial times, they trained Africans in the basic technical skills. And if they needed some higher technical skills, they imported an expatriate to come and work and supervise the Africans. I think we need to be a little realistic about what education is. And this is what Walter Rodney says. There's a contradiction built into the imperial system, which is that they don't want Africans to get education, but they need Africans to get education, just enough to run the machine, but not to ask about how we are being screwed by this machine. And there's a very popular video by George Carlin which explains this. It's the same thing with colonialism. And that's the same agenda today. So what has happened now in this 2024, when we are speaking, politicians have become very nervous about Kenyans getting university education. And this nervousness came from Uhuru. Of course, he's an aristocrat. Does he want the serfs to be educated, to understand anything which he himself cannot understand? Since the Uhuru years, there has been a slow burning of education. And this is something that we don't see, because I don't know. The myths we have about education are so bad and so entrenched. And when some of us try to refute them, Kenyans get annoyed and say we are attacking them, we are privileged, we are living in a perfect world, in a utopia. But this is historical reality, which you can read for yourself. So since Uhuru, there has been a slow burning down of education. And Matiang'i, in fact, that's the third thing I wanted to talk about these so-called presidential ambitions of Matiang'i. Matiang'i was the one person who worked so hard to destroy education. First of all, by giving us CBC. And CBC is designed to reduce us into workers and to limit the number of people who are going to university. That's the basic idea. During Matiang'i's time, he did what now the politicians want to be entrenched in the university bill. He said that we don't want anybody with a D+ and below ever entering university. And I mean ever. Basically, he was saying, even if I get a D+ and I work as a plumber and I become a better technician, when I'm 40 years old and I've reached the peak of my technique, I cannot go and study engineering. That's what he was basically saying. And these people were so vicious, they were even promising to withdraw people's degrees. So if somebody decided to become a technician, worked his way up and ended up getting a degree, let's say in water management, now they were saying that those degrees would be withdrawn until the Commission of University Education clarified that they can't withdraw these degrees because the universities are empowered to give degrees to whoever they think is qualified to have them. But Matiang'i made it an issue of, oh, people who got Ds when they were in high school are never qualified. Come on. Education is not about the school alone. People may fail in an exam, which is when they were 16, but they get enough knowledge to keep on going in the system. And by the time they are 40, they can be very good engineering teachers, by the way. All they need is to upgrade their knowledge. But even that, they were shutting it down and saying, if you never qualified, you will never enter university. That is stupid. I'm sorry. And this system of blocking people who fail at high school from ever getting an education was started by the British. And they did it through what they are calling the A-level system, which has now come back to Kenya through the junior secondary school. Imagine. So the basic idea is, and it was like that in my day, the basic idea was, if you go to high school, if you go to a secondary school and you don't get a place in a high school, the high schools were much fewer, then you can never go to university because you have not done A level. That was what Moi removed with 844. With 844, everybody in a secondary school had a chance to go to university, either now or later on, even in 20 years. As long as they had a KCSE certificate, they could move on to the next level. That is now being removed by CBC. Now they want to stop people from JSS going into high school. And then if you don't go into high school, you can't go to university because supposedly you're not qualified. The politicians with their godfathers in IMF are still committed to Kenyans not advancing in education. That's really what it is. And am I saying that schools and universities are the only places to get education? No, they're not the only places. But you see, what happens is once you block people from going to university, you now have an excuse to tell them, what are you saying and you're not qualified? Which school have you gone to? That's really what the agenda is. The agenda is to fight against African knowledge. And this is so serious, people. It is so serious, but we don't see it because we are denied education. And the media is part of this war on education when they keep talking about useless degrees and half-baked graduates. Please, anytime you hear Trevor Mbija or anybody else talking about, just know he's not on your side. He's not on your side. And this is what Walter Rodney says. Walter Rodney makes a very interesting argument that I had never thought of. And imagine, I've read this book many times, but this time it's speaking to me in a very different way. One of the things he says is that the reason why slavery was able to go on for so long is because Africans had a very limited consciousness of the world beyond them. And in fact, Africans, this is what he said, African communities did try to learn technology, to learn science, to share knowledge. And what the Europeans did, which was so evil, they came saying, yeah, we'll do exchange of technology, we'll teach you our science, we'll exchange ideas, but you first give us some slaves or get some slaves for us to send to America, then maybe we'll give you the knowledge you want. Or they would sign this MOU and later on they say, actually, we were not really interested in exchange of information, we were interested in getting people to send to the Americas. And then, because of being insulated like that, you see what happens is, once you're told that the more important thing is to produce slaves, see now a chief will now say, hey, I can't send my people, let me look for people in another community. And that introduces fighting and insecurity, because now you're warned by your peers that so-and-so, one day he went to the forest to look for medicine and never came back. And that never coming back was that he was captured and sent to the Americas or to the East. So knowledge is crucial. Knowledge is crucial. I'm not talking about certificates. I'm talking about knowledge. Knowledge is crucial. And then the next argument he made, which I just found so empowering, was that he said, Pan-Africanism was about Africans from all over the world saying, hey, we better know each other. We better know each other and know each other's histories so that we are not used against each other the way we have been for the last 400 years. And you see in the school system, what are we taught about that prevention? We were prevented from knowing each other. We were made to turn against each other. What does the school call that? It calls us warring tribes who had no civilization. We were decivilized by the West. And we were decivilized by preventing us from learning about the world. We were told that the only way we can relate to the world outside Africa is as labor. And is that not what politicians are doing? They're exporting us. So basically what I'm saying is the school is not there to teach people how to fish. I'm sorry. I know it's flattering, it makes us feel useful, but I don't think that's what the school should be for. It should be teaching us about the sea in which we fish. It should be teaching us about the ecosystems. It should be teaching us about the economy, about why are fishermen not earning enough money. That's what we need to learn from the school. To fish is when people actually go to the lake and learn from a master fisherman. That's how people will learn how to fish. Please, And it's not that we didn't know how to fish. Even this thing of saying we're going to be taught how to fish, Kenyans know how to work. Africans know how to work. We know how to dig iron ore and other metals. We know how to smelt them. We had this knowledge and it was used by the West. But what they don't want us to do is to upgrade that knowledge. That's what they don't want. That's why they're bringing these foreign companies to us and saying, we are bringing them because you people don't have the skills. No, it's because they don't want us to learn those skills and they don't want us to develop those skills. That's really what's going on. So the school is not for teaching us how to fish. It's for teaching us about the sea, about the devil who wants to take the sea from us so that we are no longer able to fish. That's what the school is for. To fish, you have to go to the sea yourself and learn from the master fishermen who have been fishing for generations. You go and learn from them. That's work is learned from work. Knowledge is learned from school. I think we need to stop confusing these things. The second thing is politicians and their godfathers from the West do not want us to go to school or to learn anything. And this makes sense because they cannot con us when we know stuff. And you will see even in the media reports about the Gen Z protests, one thing that really worried me was when they kept saying, these people are protesting because they have social media and they are educated. That was not a good thing. It was not flattering. It was a way of saying we need to stop educating Kenyans. And the politicians are working very hard to ensure that that doesn't happen. Even this sort of finance, what is it called? The university funding model, it's the same thing. It's about making sure Kenyans don't go to school, don't go to university, and don't learn anything. And like I said, the point isn't that you can only learn from the school. The point is, what has happened is that we are blocked from other types of knowledge. We are told the only place for knowledge is the school system, and then they restrict the school system so that very few people get knowledge. That's the way it works. So it's not to say that only school has knowledge. It's to say that you can only get through the school, and if you don't go to school, you know nothing. And I have been talking about this for quite some time. There's a video in which I talked about this with Joe Kobuthi on the elephant. The point is to restrict knowledge. So you channel it into one funnel and then you close the funnel. That's what politicians and their godfathers in IMF are doing with education. We better be aware what's going on. So politicians and their imperial godfathers, they don't want us to learn anything. And so they are attacking the school because they've already destroyed other ways of knowledge, or at least they have suppressed them. Then the second thing to take away is that schools should not be teaching people how to fish, but about the sea in which people fish. People can only learn how to fish from doing the actual work. And we need to drop this dream of the school teaching people how to fish, because we are basically making the school do what the workplace should be doing. And you see, That's why they don't want an economic conversation. They don't want to talk about how we are not earning from our work, how the few of us who get employed are being exploited and extracted from. That conversation has been blocked. But that's the conversation we need to have. We need to have a conversation about work and about the economy. And this idea that people learn how to work in the school, I think we need to drop it, because also it makes schooling so expensive. And I've given this example before. I was at KTN some time back, and I was saying, if you want universities to train journalists to know how to operate these video and filming machines you have in this studio, you're going to make a university education very expensive. And yet, people, now we are making films like I'm doing here with my laptop. So what is this obsession of saying that we can only train journalists in facilities that look like a real studio? And it's making universities spend so much money on technology that they can barely afford. So that's part of what makes universities expensive. And then when they become expensive, now you start saying, we can't afford, let's now have a new funding model. We are not serious. So this thing of saying that the school must replicate what the workplace is making education expensive and necessarily let people go and learn to work at the workplace. And those employers who are so arrogant and think that a 24-year-old graduate should know everything on day one, go away, leave Kenya alone. If you don't want to train the next generation, what are you doing in Kenya? We should have a society where the next generation wants to pour into the next generation. Why have these mentorship programs here, there, everywhere, if you don't want to train the people at work? And this is what I was saying about mentoring. I shouldn't be mentoring young people outside of my workplace. I should be mentoring them in the workplace. That's the conversation we need to have. So schools are not there to teach people how to work. They go to the workplace and learn there. We give them the education in the school about the economy, the society in which they work, but the actual skills, let them go and learn them at the workplace. And those people who don't want to mentor our young people, watch our end. Let them go to another country. Then it can leave us the space to build the kind of workplaces where we are kind to our young people and we train them how to work and we mentor them to take over from us. Because actually, as I've said in another video, it's the lack of mentorship that is making us have these intergenerational tensions. Because me, as an elder person, I'm not being allowed to mentor the next generation. So I'm doing the work of the next generation when I should be mentoring them, because the workplace is being constricted. And part of the problem is the way we think about education. So in a nutshell, this amendment bill of saying now universities should not teach certificates and diplomas, it's a sideshow. It's a sideshow. It's about blocking people from advancing in education. They want people to go to TVET and stop there and never enter universities. And what we should be having, as I said on X, what we should be having is an integrated TVET university system. If people start at TVET, they should be admitted into university if they want to come. Why not? We don't stay, in terms of our knowledge, we don't stay at the same place our whole lives. We must allow ourselves to grow in knowledge. You cannot remain where you were at 24. At 40, you're still having the same knowledge. Come on, it's not even human. So we should have a TVET and university integrated system. If people want to start with TVET and go to university, it should be allowed. And in fact, what Matiang'i did was to try and block it. And now he's telling us he wants to be the president. He hates young people. He doesn't want them to progress. So that bill is a sideshow. It's about limiting the education that Kenyans get. And yet when you compare Kenya to other countries that are so-called developed, these Asian tigers, The number of graduates they have is at around 40, 50%. Us, it's at 2%. How do we expect to develop like this? So that bill is a sideshow. So coming back to the story of my father taking me to the bank, the point is we can learn from many places. We can learn from professional organizations, from our workplace, from the circles, from the career fair. And that kind of knowledge doesn't need to be in the curriculum. But unfortunately, it was brought into the curriculum so that we learn nothing else. And that's the problem with CBC. It brought the things people learn elsewhere into the classroom so that now the things that should be taught in the classroom are not being taught anymore. And who brought that CBC system? Matiang'i.